So what happened like in our last class, we created our three servers, right? So we set up our chef server, then we went with our workstation, then we went with our node as well, right? So if let me go and log into each of those machines and take three machines. Let me log into my chef server. We created three machines, right? This is my chef server, and let me log into my workstation. So I have my three machines with me, up and running, right? So we have already configured that. And you know that whenever you are bootstrapping node, I told you that there are one particular process which is running in the every node, which collects all the system information, right? What is that process was called? OHI, right? I told you there is something called like OHI, system profiler, right? So basically what it is was doing is like whenever you have bootstrapped any specific node, right? It takes all the information of the specific node. Let's say in our case it is node 1. So it went into node 1, it collected all the entire system information. I mean, like, what was the information it collected? If you go into my chef manager, if you see, it collected all this information. The CPUs it has, the memory it has, right? It collected all that information. What was that process I told you? It was OHI. Very important, right? So when you're working with chef, you need to remember there is a process called OHI. Right? Whenever I will be like doing this OHI, right? So it will collect all the information which is there in my system. I mean, like specifically in node 1. You see, it was getting all the information from my node 1 and it is uploading it to my particular, what do you say, chef server. Isn't it? Now, basically, what is the meaning of bootstrap as actually? What is bootstrap doing? When you are bootstrapping a node, what is happening? It's not spinning up the node. Yeah, it is collecting the information from node, right? Then what is the process which is running in your node when you are bootstrapping? So it runs one particular application. What is that application? OHI is system profiler which collects the information. Before OHI, something is going on. Chef client. Right? So what are the components we installed? Right? So basically in your workstation, you install Chef DK development kit. In your particular Chef server, you install Chef server core and Chef manage. And in your clients, you are going to install, I mean, like in your nodes, it is Chef clients, which will run for every specific time interval. We did not do that yet. We'll do in our upcoming classes, right? So basically, I told you when it comes to your chef infrastructure, we talked about some particular terminologies, right? Saying something like cookbooks, recipes, right? Resources, right? Now we'll go and implement those. And you see, whenever you want to implement something, right, you will never work on nodes, right? Because you are having around thousands of nodes, you cannot go and work on each and every specific node, right? You first work it on your workstation, right? I mean, like when you're writing some specific cookbook, if something goes wrong, to check basically you'll log into the node, only for debugging purpose, right? Only for debugging purpose we are going to log into your particular nodes. When you want to basically install or do some particular administration task, you do that on your workstation. Clear? Right. Now let's go and basically write our cookbooks. Now what is cookbook actually, if you remember? Collection of recipes. A recipes are collection of your resources. And what is resource going to have? State. If it's for this, I mean, like if you are clear with these 4 points, it's good. We can start with the chef, right? Now let's say if you want to work, I told you that I'm going to work on workstation, and on workstation you have some specific directory, isn't it? What was it? Chef repo, right? If you want authentication, you can only be getting from chef repo only. You should be always in this particular directory. Now what you're doing, you're going to create cookbooks, right? Right? I'll go to my cookbooks directory. Right? Here you have some example cookbook, but let's say we will go and run our particular cookbook right now. Right? If you want to generate cookbooks, right, you have a particular command called chef generate. Right? Chef generate cookbook and your cookbook name. Chef generate cookbook name. Let's say I want to currently go and work with some file resource. I told you we got different resources, right? Let's start with the easier ones, right? Let's go and start with something like file, right? I'll say I'm going to work with something called like file test. Chef generate cookbook and the cookbook name. So once I issue this particular command, it goes and it basically generates that structure like your menu, one particular project, right? If I go and see, I got file test, right? If I say ls file test, I got our recipes. Can you see? I need to go and write our recipes in this one, right? So if you say ls file test and recipes, you got something called like a Ruby file default.rb. That is where you are going to write your cookbook. Nothing but you are going to define your resources over there. Isn't it? What is the recipe? Collection of resources. So you'll be going and working with your resources over there, right? And apart from this, you need to work on two particular things. So one important file is your default.rb, where you will be writing the code for your infrastructure services. I mean, like, let's say if you want to create file, install package, right? So start a service. Everything is going to be there in this particular file. And apart from this, you got one more thing called metadata. This is also very important file. Metadata basically gives you the versioning for your cookbooks. So if I say cat, if not I'll say vim file test metadata.rb. This is like your pom.xml. Right? Now you see it contains some version, right? So currently this cookbook is 0.1.0 version. Right? If you make enhancements, you can say 0.1.1. 0.1.2 and it gets stored under your chef server. All this information. It is like basically you can say that you can go and work with something like versioning with this particular metadata file, like Git. Right? Now let me quit from this file. Now what is my particular task is I want to create a file on my node 1. Generally how I can create a file, I need to log into that specific machine. I'll say like create some particular file. If I got 10,000 files, it becomes tough job. Right? Managing becomes more tough job. Now let's see how you can do the same thing with the help of chef. That is what chef is actually built for, right? So I'll write some particular recipes. Right? Now what I'm saying, file test recipes default.rb. Now let me go and now what is the resource I want to use? Sorry? node is my server infrastructure, resource, file, right? Creating a file. So basically, I want to create a file. I mean, like, I'm working with a resource right now. So generally, all the resources are there with your chef documentation. So what is the resource I want to work with? File a resource. Right, there is a file. You see what it says? Define this resource. Resource takes action. So basically, I told it desired state. That state is nothing but your action. Now let's check this file. Right, you see there is something called like file, a resource called file. So basically, this is called your a resource, and you can tell where to create that resource. And I told you every particular file or any resource, it has some state. Right? If you go down, you have something called like action. It defines that state. Now, the default action, what is it? So, if you specify file, the default state for that file is getting created. Making sense? So if you say, I want to work with a resource called file, in Chef, the default action is it gets created. Right? Now let's see, can you see any particular file under my temp directory right now? So there is nothing but say something like ravi.txt something. There is no file right now. I want to create the file. Let's see what happens. Now I'll go to my workstation. What's the resource I want to use? File. I want to use a resource called file. Where you want to update this resource? Now, where should this update actually? Under my temp directory of node1. I'll say create a resource under temp, right? And let's say the file I want to create is ravi.txt. Currently, I just want to create a file. You see, I just given file temp ravi.txt and I'll save the changes. Right? Now, you basically have small resource which is called file. So, whenever my chef client runs, automatically a file called ravi.txt will be created under my node. Right? Currently, that is our scenario. Right? So basically, let's go and update the metadata. So whenever you work on cookbooks, you always update your metadata. Let's say file test description, installs and configures. Let's say okay, everything works for time being. So if you say right maintenance email, you can go and update it here if you want. Right? Just like metadata information here. Now I'm currently just like saving up. I'm not doing any particular. Now what I need to do. So basically, where is my cookbook currently? Workstation. Is it there in my server yet? No, right? If I go into my server, can I see any cookbooks? 0. Right? I need to upload this cookbook to my chef server. Right? How I can upload it? So basically, I have got a command for that. I told you what is the utility we are using every time? Knife. Right, knife is a particular utility which is used to work on my workstation. It is like an editor for me, right? So I'll say knife, right? Cookbook. So basically, you wrote some cookbook, right? You wrote some cookbook, but whether the cookbook you wrote is it correct? Is it having the exact syntax? Because it's a Ruby file, right? Right? You need to validate. You did ambient validate, you did vagrant validate, you did lots of things, right? Even chef, you can work validate the syntax for the what is a Ruby code which you wrote, right? You can simply say knife cookbook test, right? What is the cookbook I wrote? So I just can say like cookbook members, right? Once I do that, it will go and it will scan. It says it's deprecated, but everything looks correct as of now. There is no error. If there is any particular error, right, it will throw up an error saying it's not valid. Right? Now, let's go and upload this cookbook. I'll simply say knife, cookbook, upload. What is the thing I need to upload? File test. Right? Yes, it says it uploaded one particular cookbook right now. If you want to get the information in CLI itself, you can say knife, cookbook, list. You can use this one as well. If you give that, it will tell you the list of cookbooks which are there with you. Right? And how many nodes I got currently associated? One. How I can know that? I can go into my GUI mode, but instead of that, you can simply say knife node list. Nodes which are there. Right? If I say knife node list, it gives me currently node 1. Right? If I go back to my server and if I do a refresh, I have the file test with me right now. Right? But where this cookbook should be there? I told you every node is going to have something called like, what is it? A run list, isn't it? You remember? I told you that every particular node is going to have some run list. What is run list? Nothing but whatever the things that it should go and run on this particular node 1. Right? How you can get to know it? Basically, you can say knife node show and the node. So currently it is node 1. Right? What this particular command is going to do is it will tell what are the run lists which are available for this node currently. Right? Run list is nothing but what you want to run on that node 1. If I say, you see, can you see any run list here? 0. There is no run list yet available. So basically you need to add some run list. Making sense? Clear? Till here? So what we did was, we created one cookbook, right? We uploaded that cookbook, and how your particular chef client is going to talk, I told you, right? Whenever chef client runs on your server, I mean like in your infrastructure node, it goes and it talks to your chef server, and what will ask? Do I have any policy? That is nothing but your run list here. Right? So currently there is no run list associated. Now we need to add the run list. Right? So I'll say knife node run underscore list add, right, node 1. What you want to add? This is a particular command which you need to run to attach some policies to your infrastructure nodes. What is the policy I am attaching currently? File test. So I am telling that whenever my chef client runs on my node 1, it should ask the policy. That policy should be file test. You see, if I have not added it, you see currently node 1. If I say edit run list, do I have anything here? Current run list? Nothing. Once I update, then it would be added up here. Right? So what I'll do is like, I'll just go to this machine, I'll say add it up. Now it says a particular file test was added to my run list of node 1. Now if I run the same particular command, now the file test is updated here, and if I go to my GUI version and if I refresh it, and if I say edit run list, currently I am having file test. Now when will your node will come and ask your server whether to follow that particular policy? When will the trigger happen? Exactly. When chef client runs on your node, it talks to your server and makes sure what is the policy which is there. It takes that policy, it executes itself. Now, basically, what you're doing, if you're writing run list means, I mean, like if you're updating that run list, it means that you are setting some state, right? You are setting some state in your chef server. What is the current state you are telling? Create a file called ravi.txt in temp directory. So whenever chef client runs in your nodes, it goes, talks to your chef server, takes that policy, applies that policy. Sorry? On node. Basically on node 1, because currently you are only having one node with you. Right? Now what I'll do is like, I'll go to this particular thing and I'll say sudo chef clients. Right? Now what will it basically do is, it will again run the OHI process. Right? It again runs the OHI process, collects the information, matches the information with your current node. If it is not up to date, or let's say it is not with the policy, it makes sure that it follows the policy. Making sense? Now once I run this sudo chef client, so it was executing your run list. What is the run list which is available? Right? Converging one resource, it went with the recipe. Then it said it created a file. Why? Because the default action of file resource is create. Isn't it? If I go to my good work, it says the default is create. Now it went and it created a file. It says chef client finished one resource. Because currently you are only working with file resource. Now if I go and check my right, and I talked about something called like configuration drift. Anyone remember configuration drift? Insha? Configuration drift. Right. So basically what happens in configuration drift is, let's say you are working on this particular server. Now probably one particular person came and deleted that file. Right? Basically what is happening, let's say someone deleted your configuration file. Someone went and deleted http.conf. Will your web server will work like earlier? No, right? It is basically, it will not work because it's not having any configuration file. Now basically chef will always make sure that it goes with the policy. Right? Now if I remove this file here again, I told you that particular chef client always runs for certain time of interval. You will basically create some cron tabs and run that particular thing. Now whenever my particular node 1 falls out of policy, what is the meaning of falling out of policy here? Basically it is not matching the state of my current server. Because in my server I am saying that it should have a file called right ravi.some.txt there. Whenever it is not matching that configuration, so that is called configuration drift. Whenever configuration drift happens, chef will automatically make sure that it goes with the current policy. What is the current policy? Creating the file. Now let's say I'll say rm-rf/temp. I created because I'm not having the sudo. I went and it created a file. If I say ls/temp, I no longer have the file called ravi.txt. Now, if I say sudo chef client again, it automatically created that file again. Making sense? If something goes wrong with your configuration, someone deletes your configuration files. Now this is not only with one server. If you have 20,000 servers, it does the same. It will keep the policies of each and every particular node which is going to be there with the help of your cookbooks. It's fetching from chef server, right? Server. Right? We updated it. I mean, like we uploaded it and we told that it should be there with the node one's run list, isn't it? That's the node one run list. Now, if you want to change something, if I say I'll go to this particular file, I'll say vim slash temp iv.txt and I'll say, okay, sorry. I'll say hello. I'll save. Now you want to change some configuration. I changed it. Imagine that configuration file I went and I changed it. Now again, after certain interval of time, what happens again? Chef client runs, isn't it? Right? Now you see, it says action up to date. Right? If I go and basically say, sorry, this having still hello. But if again I am going and creating, because whenever you want to do something, right, you should never do this on this machine. You should never work on nodes. Now if I mistakenly, let's say if I remove my temp again, I deleted the file again. Now I won't have that hello dot content with me. Making sense? If I update here, it's never going to work. It's basically temporary change. Whenever again my chef client runs, if I remove something, it's gone. So it says again it created the file. I say so anything you want to do, always we need to work on your workstation. I mean, like you need to update your, what I need to update? I need to update the policy. Right? I need to update the policy through my, I mean, like through your workstation actually. Because where is your, where are you going to write the recipe? Right? That's where you need to go and update it. Right? Now let's say I want to put some content in that file. Right? What I'll do? I'll simply go to my current cookbook. I'll say vim, sorry, file test, right? Under that file test, you got default recipes default.r. Now this is the file I want to go with. Now I'll say I want some content in it. Right? If you want some content, right, you cannot go and directly write it like that. Right? See what it is saying. If you are using file resource, it follows Ruby syntax. So if you are writing more than one parameter, you need to go with do and end, like your vagrant, if you remember. If you are having multiple parameters, like something like, let's say, if you remember it, we are going with load balancing concepts and all that. Right? I need to go with the same particular thing. Now I'll say I want to put some content in there. Right? What I'll do? I'll say this is the file. Oh, sorry. Right? For this particular file, I'll say do. Right? I'll go with my end. Making sense? So anything you're writing, you should have something like this particular configuration. So basically when you are working, always use the help of documentation of chef. Very, very useful. Right? So I'll say, now what I want to do, I want to put some content in that file. Content. Right? And I'm changing this. Now you need to again update your cookbook. See, what is the current version of cookbook you are having? So if I go to the policy, you are having 0.1.0. See, versions is only 1. Now I want a new version of the same cookbook, which not only creates a file, but also updates the content of the file. Right? I'll say VIM and this is my version 1.1. Right? I'll make these changes. Again, I'm going to say knife, cookbook, upload, file test. Now what it does? It updates the version 0.1.1 to my chef server. Got it? So what is the version it updated? 0.1. What is this version is doing? Actually, it is creating content as well. Right? So if I go and if I refresh, you see I got two versions, 0.1.0, 0.1.1. If I click on 0.1.1, if I say content, I wrote my recipes here, right, and default.rb. You see, this is what I wrote right now. But for my version 1.0, that's different, isn't it? If I go to my 0.1.0 and if I say the content and the recipes and default.rb, it is just the file being created. Right? Clear? Now if I run chef client here, what it does basically, it uploads again. Right? Now if I say sudo chef client. Now you see, it went and it changed the content. You see, it added something like hello. Now even like earlier, if I remove this file, now let's say if I say cat/temp and ravi.txt, so I'm having something like hello there. But like in my earlier case, if I go and remove this file, right? Now if I do my chef client again, it does basically the task of creating my file as well as updating the content as well. Right? So basically what is the purpose of configuration management tools is like whenever something you want to fix on those particular infrastructure servers, it is always easy to do with the help of configuration management tools. So that you're not going to that specific server every time and checking the changes. Right? Chef will automate that process. If something falls out of the policy, it makes sure that it goes with that policy. And all you need to do is like do that configuration under your workstation and upload it. Chef makes sure that it follows it. Isn't it? That's what we talked about. Right? Got it? So like that you can go and do lots of stuff. Let's say for this resource I don't want like just content. I want these one as well. Right? So let's say if not I directly go and I'll say, so currently what is the permissions which is it's taking up ls-n/temp ravi.txt. It is going with something like 644 permissions. It was root and root. Now I want to give 777 permissions with something like Ravi and Ravi. Right? Now if even someone comes and changes the ownership or permissions, it will automatically revert it back. Right? So where I can do it again, I need to make sure it is always changed in the workstation. So I'll say not sudo, I'll say vim file test, then recipes and then default.rb, and I'll say not only the content but I want to update the mode as well. So let's say I'll use something like 777 open to everyone. Right? I'll say owner. Let's say something like right, and I'll say group. Right? Now I'll make these changes and let's say I'll upload the cookbook. Right. Now I'm updating it to my server basically. Right? Once it's updated, whenever my chef client talks back, right? So it is going to do 3 changes right now. It will go and change the permissions, change the ownership as well as group ownership. It went and it modified it. Now if I do, it has given 777 permissions and ownership. Now even if I forcefully try to change it down, now I change it down. If I change, yes, it has been back to root and root. But after some time again, chef client will automatically run and the configuration comes back to your original policy. Right? Again, if I go and I check, yes, I'm back to my original policy. Making sense where chef can be actually used right now. Anything you want to fix the configuration, you don't want to deviate from that policy. Right? And if you are having large infrastructure, so controlling this in 5 or 10 servers is very easy. Controlling it in thousands of servers is what the challenge is. That can be automated with the help of chef. Clear? Right? I think like everyone is like feeling dull right now. So maybe like we'll stop the session here. Maybe like what we, yeah, please. Basically, yes, cookbook.
So run list is the cookbook.
Yeah.
Policy is the
Basically, in run list, we are saying something like our recipes actually terminology changes us. But at the end of the day, it's a cookbook. Yeah.
So here we have changed it to versions.
Right.
1.0. Can we go back to 1.0?
Yes, that is possible with the help of environment sponsor. We'll see like that. So that's what environment's roles are playing that role.
Can we say that this should run on only if you know
Yes, 100% possible. So that's what it. Now let's say that particular thing might help you in this scenario. Let's say you have wrote the cookbook. Now it's version 1.0.0. Later you updated to 1.1.1. Later you updated to 1.1.1. Here, this is like your development environment where your Apache should run on code. This is the same particular code. Installation is same, but this is your QA environment where it should run on 8080. Let's imagine not it is 808. And when it comes to your production, right, this cookbook should run on 8. Because this server is different, this server is different, this server is different. Right? If you want this kind of configuration, environments, roles, then like different roles, you can use this particular concepts. Right? Lots of things are there in Shell. We need to like go with some security aspects. Right? This is like very simple. We will work with something like packages, services, resources. Currently, we only worked on file resources. You can go and work on. We'll work with multiple resources. We work with users, groups. Basically, all your administration tasks. Isn't it generally what you're doing? You're creating files. You're changing the ownerships. You're updating the content, right? Then you're installing the packages. You're like enabling them, stopping them, right? You're removing the applications, right? All this can be automated. For each and every specific task or particular, I'm talking about like let's say systemctl or service command or let's say something like touch command, right? Everything has some resource. So basically, if you see file resource, it is actually doing touch command in the back, isn't it? So generally, if you want to create a file, what you'll say? You'll say touch, right? The file. That's what file resource is doing actually, right? Every resource is going to have some state. What we are doing with Chef is basically we are controlling that state. That is important. So you can control that state. Why we are controlling the state? Because when your infrastructure grows, it's not in your hands anymore. Right? You are having thousands of servers. You cannot go and stick like each and every server is going to the same particular port number policies, right? That is basically where Chef comes into the picture. Right? Basically, now what you will do is you created a file, right? Actually, this file is part of your infrastructure. Right? That part you manage with code. Now if I want the same file with the same content, with the same privileges to be created in some other business unit, what I can do? I can version control it, isn't it? I can say git init, I'll add the cookbook. There's a git clone, that cookbook. All they need to do is like add this cookbook to the run list. Done. Right? It's like Vagrant as you can see, you have Vagrant, but Vagrant does not have the feature of controlling your policies. Right? Even Vagrant was doing the same thing, isn't it? So you are using some shell scripts, you are spinning up the machines, you are basically going and what do you say? You are like installing the packages, right? You are like basically, let's say, installing some particular websites, everything. The same thing you are doing, but more controlled. Right? That is what Chef is capable of. So we'll go with multiple cookbooks. You'll get an idea like how you can use it on different scales. Right? So we have like lots of things to be going with. So we just like soft file. Then we'll work with some web applications. Then we have something called like templates, cross-platform check. Now, if you see, if I say something like yum app, so where yum runs generally, it works on centralized based machines or rel-based machines. Whereas app it runs on your Ubuntu or Debian based machines. You can also control this one. Based upon the type of platform you are using, your operating system, you can control what to install, what not to install. That is also possible. So because why it's possible, all your code is Ruby. It will run across different kinds of platforms. That's how it would be very helpful if you understand this particular concept. Yeah.
So, in the chess server, if you want to use app update,
Yes.
can you schedule a job as well so that the
100%. But not in basically Chef server. We need to do that in the workstation first. Right? Basically, you write a code to do the app update. Then you upgrade that to your Chef server. You define the policy, I mean like this policy where you want to run yum update on which server, let's say node 1 or node 2 or node L. Right? That's all. Now let's say you want to do yum update. Let's say you are having your 2000 servers. Now what you do, simply you have something like roles concept as in which we go. Once you add it, all the 2000 servers for every particular 30 minutes or 45 minutes of interval, they keep on talking to your Chef server. If something is updated here, everything gets updated over there as well. That's the powerful feature of Chef actually. Right? What? Fine. Is it clear today? Like what we did actually the functionality point at least, right? So we did the same thing which we talked about in our diagram system, right? So we went, we created a particular cookbook, right, which was nothing but collection of recipes, nothing but collection of resources. Right, your cookbook was having recipes are nothing but collection of your resources. Right? Then you can take this particular what is a cookbook and you are uploading to your Chef server, and every particular node will have something called like Chef client running in it. Whenever Chef client is running, it collects the information from your Chef server. Information in the sense the policy. Policies has some state. That state it is defining in your node machines. That's it. That's all about Chef actually. Now that we need to work with different implementations where you can make it much better in your most of the scenarios, your infrastructure. Right? So we'll see like how you can install, start the services, create the users. Lots of things are there. Right? So at least like try to set up, make sure that you have all your 3 servers, I mean like your workstation, Chef server and your nodes set up. Then from tomorrow we will work with the cookbooks as well. So make sure, because it is somewhat typical, right? Because you are adding public keys, private keys in different machines and making the connection. If connection is successful, then only you'll be able to make the cookbooks. If not, not possible. Right? In our upcoming class, not only one node, we'll work with multiple nodes. We will see something like these kind of implementations where you can run across different platforms. Right? Got it? Today we'll stop the session.